What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. How the heck is everybody doing? In today's video, I want to talk to you about, is the DRZ400 Supermoto a good beginner bike? Is the DRZ400 Supermoto a good beginner bike, or is any Supermoto a good beginner bike? And let's talk about some of the pros of riding a Supermoto as your very first motorcycle. I think right off the bat, TLDR, if you don't want to listen to the whole video, basically the DRZ400 I think is a great first bike and a great approachable Supermoto. Number one is the engine. It's a very tame engine for a Supermoto. Of course, you're going to have the torque in first and second gear, but to be honest, that's about it. You're not going to have a lot of torque through all the other gear ranges. It's very forgiving in terms of how much throttle you want to give it, the engine braking, and all of the above. So I think it's a pretty timid Supermoto for the most part. I mean, if you've ridden anything like, 600cc or higher, this is a very timid motorcycle. But let's talk about the engine for a second. This motor puts out 39 horsepower, and that is really going to be plenty for you to get on, learn, and become confident while riding a motorcycle. And the cool thing about Supermotos is, of course, they're like hooligan machines, right? You can ride them anywhere. You can go off-road, you can go on-road. You can do a lot of fun stuff with these bikes, and you can really test your different riding styles to see what really suits you. And even the better thing is you can get these bikes for a tremendous price too. So the engine, I think, is very forgiving. It's mechanically easy to work on. It's a carbureted engine. It's easy to get to all the engine components. It's very straightforward when it comes to maintenance. Do your oil changes, check your tire pressure, check your brakes, change your air filter occasionally, and to be honest, you're pretty much good to go. I mean, it's a very mechanically sound motorcycle and very easy to work on, but the engine overall is a great beginner to intermediate rider engine. I think if you're getting this bike expecting, top speed performance, you're probably looking in the wrong category. That's really not what Supermotos are meant for. These are meant for hopping on city streets and ripping around, or getting on a track and ripping around on a track. They are really not meant for like top speed cruising and highway commuting. Can you do it? Of course, but the DRZ400 really isn't meant for that type of riding. So let's go ahead and hop on the bike and talk about a few more things that I think are really cool, and then some opportunities I think the DRZ400 has for a beginner rider. While we're driving down this rocky little road right here, the second thing I want to talk to you about is the riding position on this motorcycle. It's basically like riding a dirt bike on the street, and for that alone, you have a very upright riding position. Your arms are dropped down pretty low. It gives you a lot of control and feedback over the motorcycle. You can turn, you can swerve if you need to very easily on this motorcycle. And again, the ergonomics are good for your standard everyday commute that you're doing, as long as you're not, ripping on the highway for an hour each direction to work or something like that. I think the ergonomics are great for a beginner rider. I have a buddy who hasn't ridden in about 20 years, and he hopped on this bike and he was able to get on, use the clutch, use the shifter, use the throttle, no problem. He was really able to ride this bike without any sort of issue. I had 3 bikes at the time when he rode this one. I had the Z900, I had the DRZ400 Supermoto, and I had the Yamaha Bolt Bobber. And out of all 3 of those bikes, he said the DRZ400 was the easiest bike for him to ride. And rightfully so. Once you get your leg over this bike and crank it up, you feel very in control of this motorcycle. The weight of this bike is only like 300 and some odd pounds. I'll put it on the screen what the exact weight is. It's a very easy to ride and nimble motorcycle, which I like very much, as most Supermotos are. but you have a lot of great feedback and control over this bike. And he very much liked the riding position and just the overall ergonomics of the DRZ over the Z900 and even the Yamaha Bolt that we had. The next thing I want to talk about for a beginner rider is, personally, I think the DRZ looks really cool. And that's going to be subjective, of course, but if you're a new rider, come on, let's be honest. Everyone who hops on a bike has a little bit of an ego, and you're going to want to look cool. And of course, this may not be your riding style. You may be a cruiser guy, a sport bike guy, a naked guy. Wait, what? An adventure rider guy. There's a lot of, or girl, there's a lot of different bike options out there, but if you're looking for a supermoto, you know, they just kind of look cool personally, and let's be honest, it's like riding a dirt bike on the street. So it's fun. It's a little bit of a hooligan machine. You know, you can do some spirited riding, you know, and have a lot of fun with this bike. And so that was one of the reasons I got it. I went from a Suzuki Boulevard M109R, which is a huge, heavy, big 1800cc cruiser, to this, because this suited my riding style more. To put it in context for you, I had that bike for 3 years. This was before the channel, and I put like 800 miles on it. I've had this bike for 1 year now, and we have 956 miles, but I've had other motorcycles that we've ridden a lot more during that time, if you've kept up with the channel. And so this bike just inspires riding, which is really cool and really fun. And the last thing I want to talk to you about on why I think it's a good beginner bike is the modability. And if you watch the 5 Things I Love video, you know, there are endless mods for this motorcycle to make it your own. If you want to make it more of a long distance riding bike, you can get a windscreen for it. If you want it to be more of an off-road bike, you can get some off-road dual sport tires. If you want more of a street bike, you can keep the Supermoto tires on it. You know, if you want a lower seat height, get a new seat. Higher seat height, get a new seat. If you want new grips, you know, new fairings, new looks. There are tons and tons of modifications you can do for this motorcycle. Now let's talk about a couple of reasons why I don't think the DRZ400 Supermoto, or a Supermoto in general, is a good beginner bike. So number one, it can be intimidating because of just the seat height alone. Depending on your height and how comfortable you are throwing your leg over the motorcycle when you first try it out, either to test ride or just to sit on the showroom floor, or if you're buying used, you know, obviously you're looking at it from somebody. But the seat height, I believe the seat height stock is about 34 inches. I'll put it on the screen right here. And it can be a little intimidating for a new rider, as you might not be able to flat foot both sides of this motorcycle. So when you come to a stop, you'll have to throw one foot down and possibly, you know, lean the bike slightly over one direction just to be comfortable when you come to a stop. Now, for me, I'm 5'9". I got a Seat Concepts low seat, and that pretty much fixed that for me. But it didn't really bother me. It was more about comfort, really, the reason why I got the new seat. And I figured, you know, what the hell, if I'm getting a seat, might as well get one that's a little bit lower, that you know, feels a little bit more comfortable. So I went with the Seat Concepts low seat, and that helped out a tremendous amount. I would just say I wouldn't start messing with the suspension too much on motorcycles. When you start putting lowering links on, and you start putting you know, different suspension modifications to lower the bike, you lose, number one, suspension travel, but also you lose some of the engineers spend a lot of time designing these bikes for a very specific way they ride. So once you start lowering them, you're going to start losing some of that rideability that you had when it was stock height. So I think the seat height for a new beginner rider can be a little intimidating. And remember earlier when I was talking about the engine being really good and a really approachable engine and very forgiving, I will also say that that's a little bit of a negative, in that a Supermoto is just generally a little bit underpowered. So I think this bike has around 37 to 39 horsepower off the showroom floor. And is that plenty to get you around? Sure. This bike will cruise at 70 miles an hour, not a problem, but it doesn't really like it. I mean, you can, sure, you could do it, but if you're planning on getting this bike as like a long distance rider or something that you're commuting long distances to work on, or you're hitting the highways a lot, it's just not that fun, to be honest with you. Now that can be subjective, of course, and your riding style may vary, but for me personally, if I'm doing a highway ride or something, the DRZ is not the first bike I'm looking at personally. I'm really looking to get on a cruiser or a sport bike or a naked bike or something like that, because they just rev out a little bit higher. Now, remember earlier I told you also we were going to talk about like the 690 SMCR, the Ducati Hyper Motard. Yeah, those are technically supermotos, but they're also much heavier, and I would say they're definitely not beginner supermotos. You're talking much higher horsepower for those bikes, and they're going to be a little less forgiving on you in terms of a new rider. So I would recommend actually staying away from like I think there's an Aprilia, a Ducati, and of course the KTM 690 SMCR, and then the Husqvarna 701 Supermoto as well, you know, which are basically the same engine. So I would definitely recommend staying away from those if you're a beginner rider. Now if you're a more experienced rider, guys, those are the bikes you want to look at, although they come with a premium. I think personally the DRZ400 Supermoto is a terrific bike. It's very approachable, it's got a solid engine, plenty to get you to learn on, plenty engine for you to learn and grow into. Personally, the look is just amazing. I freaking love the way that the Supermotos look, particularly the DRZ400, even though it hadn't changed much to, I don't know, 21 years, but it's still a really cool looking bike. And I would say the DRZ400 is a great beginner bike and something you should definitely look at if this is your type of style. Now I will caveat all of this by saying definitely go test ride different bikes, see what you're most comfortable on, definitely get a feel for what inspires you and what type of riding you're going to be doing. Are you going to be doing off-road, on-road, mostly street, more cruising with friends, hitting the track? Like, what are you going to be doing? Those types of decisions will absolutely influence what your buying decision will and should be, not just based on, you know, its appearance and that's kind of a cool bike. So definitely spend your time looking at a lot of different motorcycles and seeing what suits your style best and see what you're most comfortable on. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, do me a favor, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, we're growing the community, and click that bell to get notified when more videos come out. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Later.